miss anything, that's fine. You can go back and watch the stream. I posted this stream on the, not Discord, the Slack channel. So you can go back and review all of this, watch it at 7 times speed or half times speed, whatever. Anyway, hi guys, I'm Alex. We're going to be talking about CSS today. And yeah, how many of you were here last time when I did the HTML? Okay, about half of you. That's great. How many of you feel comfortable with HTML? Raise your hand high in the air. Okay, awesome. Those of you that are not comfortable with HTML, CSS is a building block that goes on top of HTML. So I'll do a little bit of explaining HTML, but I highly recommend that you go back in the Slack channel to the video that I put up last time. Watch that to get up to speed on HTML. Don't do that right now unless you're like really uncomfortable and feel like you absolutely have to do that. Then fine, you can go out and do that. Do that afterwards. But that'll give you a nice foundation on HTML for what we're going to do now. Yeah, so if you want to follow along, you can follow that link there. Sorry, it's really long. That's because my username's really long. But it's exactly the same thing that I'm using. You can see here. So you can follow along there. And then we're going to be using this CSS starter, which is a link to this website called CodePen, which lets you type in code, and then it shows you the output down here. I'm actually going to change the view because this is kind of there. That's better. So I already have some HTML over here, so we're not going to be writing any HTML today. But about halfway through, I'm going to switch over to this, and we're just going to live code the rest of the time. You can follow along, watch everything that I'm doing. Yeah, so first, about me. Hey, that's me. I'm the one with the sunglasses and the hat, not the dinosaur. That's my wife, also not the dinosaur. It's the lady there. We like dinosaurs, and yeah, we like to party. So we've been married since January of 2017, so almost 2 years. Yeah, it's been fun. It's a party, party, party. So CSS is about styling the web, so that's what you're going to learn about today. I'm going to teach you a couple of things about how to create these styles. I am not going to be teaching you about good design. I'm going to leave that up to you. Each of you is going to have to get your own good eye for design because there's no way I'm going to teach that in an hour. You're going to be teaching yourself though. I'm going to have you follow along with me if possible as I do the live demo stuff so that you can get a little bit of experience with it. You're also going to be telling me what you want to have happen so that I can explain to you this is how you do this thing and this is how you do this thing, okay? And there's going to be a lot of interaction. That's why I have this link here. If you haven't gone to this link yet, you don't have to, but I'll make sure that it gets put up a little bit later. We will be doing this interaction though. Here's what not to expect though. I'm not going to be able to just beam this information directly into your brain. You're going to have to do a little bit of work to figure it out. It's also going to be a little bit of practice. I personally do not consider myself to be a CSS expert. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice in order to understand the skills necessary to do the things with CSS. It's a little bit complicated. Even experienced people complain about it all the time. But it's really powerful, and I hope that you can take that away after today. And I hope that you'll be able to use the resources I give you in order to learn more on your own, because that's really the best way that you're going to be able to learn this. So, let's get started. Woo! Who can tell me what HTML is? If you were here last time, great. If not, but you know it, just shout it out. Yes, hypertext markup language. What does that mean? The language of the internet. In part, yeah. What do we use HTML for? To design websites. Specifically, we're going to use HTML to define the structure, okay? I think that the best way that I can show you this is by going to this web page here and showing you this HTML, okay? This is all HTML here. This is what it looks like. Does that look like a nice website? I mean, it gets the job done, and best part, it's already responsive. So I can go ahead and change the size, and it already, like this works for mobile websites, just like that. It's awesome. there's actually a parody website that somebody made that I'm not going to repeat the name of because it's kind of offensive, but it talks about how it's just a basic, simple website, and that's all that you need. You don't need to have JavaScript and CSS and all that crap. This is all you need to make a nice website. But some of us disagree, which is why CSS exists. So here's a good analogy. If that first image is the structure CSS, or of HTML, CSS gives us the presentation and appearance. So notice the structure could actually be applied to many different characters. We could use that same structure to create Superman or Batman or Spider-Man or Iron Man or Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel or whoever. But it's the CSS that gives it the style so that we know, oh, that's Deadpool. Okay, great. And then finally JavaScript, which hopefully if Peter lets me, I'm going to do a JavaScript. Oh, he just gave you the thumbs up. So next time, or one of these times, I'm going to do a JavaScript shindig where we're going to talk about how you can make your Deadpool dance. Okay. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the presentation or the appearance, making it look pretty. Okay? So, yeah, when we are working with CSS, we're changing what we call the styles. Okay? Styles can apply to a whole lot of different things, but for the most part, it deals with the way that things look. Okay? So let's take a look at an example. This is a website called CSS Zen Garden. Crap. Give me just a second. Yeah. Whatever. And it's a nice looking website. It has this nice header, it has these nice background images, and this logo over here. And ooh, you see that? How it fades in and out? Ooh, that's nice. Oh, and look at that transparent background. On a scale from 1 to 10, what would you give this website? 6. Wow, tough crowd. 7. Okay. Well, okay, let's see. There's this button, View All Designs. The interesting thing about this website is it's a demonstration of what can be accomplished through CSS-based design. You see, back in the day, CSS wasn't actually a thing. You just had HTML, and there were special things you could do with the HTML with attributes and stuff to style it, to make it look how you wanted it to look. But that made up for some pretty crappy websites. In addition to that, people just kind of did whatever they want with their websites to make them look however they wanted, like using tables for layout, which if you were here last time, you know, don't use tables for layout, and just slapping an image on the website, making it so that you can click in certain areas of that image and calling it a day. For example, the Space Jam website, right here. I showed you this last time. This is just a bunch of images that are slapped into a... Hang on, give me a second. I can find it. No, I can't zoom in because I haven't even found what I'm looking for, but as soon as I do, I'll zoom in. It's just a bunch of images slapped into a table. Okay? They didn't actually use any CSS for this website. And it looks fine, but it doesn't look great. So what CSS Zen Garden was, they said, we're going to show you how awesome we can make websites with CSS. So they actually have a bunch of designs. Here's the cool thing about these designs is all of these have exactly the same HTML. They use exactly the same HTML, but they come up with incredibly different designs by changing the CSS. Ain't that something? Look at that. See, this is the design, select a design section. Okay, here's another one. This one's kind of weird because it actually has these strange things that slide in and out and are really weird. I'm not sure how I feel about this website. I don't think it's very usable, but it's interesting and it's cool. How about this one? I have no idea what's going on back there. I don't think I want to know, actually. Oh, but look at that. Isn't that kind of sassy there? How it has this weird thing that just kind of is there? I don't know. Yeah, you can see that. Cool. Again, all of this is exactly the same HTML. And then finally this one, which I love because it's just so interesting. It shows what you can do with CSS. So, cool. Interestingly enough, you'll find that the website, the HTML that we're going to be using in our demo is CSS Zen Garden. I stole the HTML from them, and we're going to use it when we do all of our stuff. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is just a note to me. Make sure you show this. This is the HTML that all of those web pages were using. So, CSS has three things that you need to know. First is the selector. If you want to style something, you first need to know what that something is. You need to specify that. And we use the selector. In fact, I haven't even told you what CSS stands for. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Okay? I'm going to get to that. I shouldn't have told you that yet, but I'll get to what cascading means in just a minute. But selectors let you choose what HTML elements get the style. The second is properties. This is what style changes are added to the element. So in this case, it's going to be colors, or the font size, or the width of the element, or any other number of properties. There are a ton of properties, which I'll show you a couple in a bit. And then finally is the value. What are you changing the property to in order to make it do whatever it's supposed to do? You can have it be a color. You can have it be a size. In this case, I'm saying 10 pixels, but it could be 2 inches, or 3 rems, or 14... That's actually CH. It's a real size value. And then there are keywords that you can use, like hidden, or left, or right, or whatever. There are a lot of different keywords that you just have to remember. Or look up. We'll probably look some up. So, first, selectors. This is where the HTML that you write and the CSS that you write come together. CSS doesn't let you just use the HTML tag itself as the selector. You have to use specific syntax, a specific way of referencing a specific type of element. Okay? So first we have tag selectors. Last time we talked about HTML tags, which is this thing that starts with an open bracket here, and it has the tag name in the middle, and then you have the closed bracket here, and then you can put stuff in the middle of that. Okay? I haven't put any stuff in the middle of any of these, just for brevity, but you could put whatever you want in the middle. To select an element, all you have to do is the name of the element. So here I say P, and that's going to select every single P tag. Any properties that I want to change are going to go in between these curly braces. Okay? I'll show you how that works in just a bit. I've got the same thing here with the span, and it's the same thing over here. I just have span, the name of the tag, and then over here I have the brackets. And then finally div and div. So far so good? Any questions? What questions do you have? Okay, if you have any questions, just throw your hand in the air, and I will answer the question as soon as I get to you. Cool? Cool. One thing to note about tag selectors is you might use the same tag multiple times on the web page. We don't necessarily want to style every single P tag if we want to have different levels of the P and stuff. So make sure that you use this carefully so you don't style all the things. Let's do a quick example. Who needs this URL still? Is everybody here? Okay, I'm going to pull up this URL really quick. Bloop, 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 bloop. Pull that up really quick, and then as soon as you get that, we will do a little bit of coding. Okay, anybody not ready? Well, it's too late. We're moving on. Boo, 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 boo. Oh, right here. So, let's come here to our CSS area, and we've got our HTML area, and we're going to do some element tags. So first, let's style our body. I want to give this a nice background color. So I'm going to start by typing the name of the tag, body, and then open bracket, and then I'm going to open up a new line. One of the nice things about CSS is you can put white space pretty much wherever you want. Well, there are some places you can't, but as far as spacing between lines, I can put as many spaces between lines as I want, and it works just fine. Let's change the background color of the body, which will be the entire website, to somebody name a color. Green. That is an ugly color. It's my least favorite, I'm sorry. If you really like it, I don't. But we'll make a Christmassy type website. So notice I have a property here. The property is background color. If I want to change the background color of an element, I will use background-color. And then here I have green, which means change it to green. And you can see the effects right there. Okay. Let's change the background color of our p tags though, because green is an awful color. So we'll add p, and then we'll change the background color to red. And there, every single p tag now has the background color of red. Okay. Now on some of these it can be a little bit hard to read the text. So let's make it so that our text for everything else is, for our body, is yellow. Now something that's interesting to note here, to change the text color, instead of saying background color, I just say color. Not text color, just color. And I'm going to make it yellow. Notice something interesting. In fact, what's interesting? What surprised you about what just happened? Anybody surprised? Or is this like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. That's how I expected it to be. Awesome. I'll tell you what's surprising to me. And then you can be like, oh, okay, I see. Notice we have a section and a header and an H1 and H2. That's where these puppies come from. These are H1 and H2. And I have these P tags that I already styled down here, but I'm not selecting any of those. All that I'm doing is selecting the body and changing the body's color to yellow. This is where the C in CSS comes from, the cascade. What happens is I set the color on the body, which is the outer element, and then everything inside of the body is also going to accept those same CSS properties, unless I specifically override it and say, don't do it that way, okay? So, for example, if I wanted to change the color of the P tags, the text color, to Rebecca Purple, which is kind of hard to see, but it's also a really nice color of purple, and it has a really interesting story, which I'll tell you later maybe. Now it's overridden the body color, and instead of it being yellow, it's going to be purple. Rebecca Purple specifically, okay? Any questions? Yes?
So with the kind of like lower elements or like child elements, do you have to specify each specific one, or is there a way to just say under that? So with the, is there a way to have just the H1 and H2 be, I guess, implemented instead of the paragraphs without specifically having to go to the paragraph CSS code and say change this one? Is that better?
Yeah, so when you say, what you want is to have the H1 and H2 have a style, but not the paragraphs, right?
Yes.
So in that case, probably not. I would have to specifically select the H1 and the H2. And this is where CSS is a little bit of a pain, but it's also really powerful. I can be as specific as I want in selecting the H1 and the H2. Okay? Let's take an example. Suppose, well, let me think, how am I going to do this? Okay, here's one. We have these ABBR tags, which stand for abbreviation. Makes it so that I can hover over this, and then it's going to tell me, that's really small, but it says cascading style sheets. It abbreviates it and tells me what the abbreviation is, and it gives me this nice little dotted underline. Suppose, and we can see that there are abbreviations all over the place. Suppose that we only want to change this abbreviation in this H2, but we don't want to change any of the other abbreviations. And we want to make their fonts a little bit bigger, okay? So let me come here and I'll do ABBR, font size, and I'm going to make them 30 pixels. That'll make them really big and it'll be obvious, okay? Now notice, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. Instead of selecting just this one, it's selecting all of the ABBRs. Not what I wanted. Fortunately, I can make this selector more specific. Instead of saying I want all of the ABBRs, I can say I want only ABBRs that are the children of H2s. So I can come here and say H2, ABBR. It goes in order of the parentness. So the parent first and then the child. And I can actually go as many children deep in the selector as I want. But you just put the first selector and then a space and then whatever the child selector is. Any questions? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to be specific about what elements you want to have what style. And if you need to be more specific, you can chain selectors together in order to create a more specific selector. Okay? But sometimes that doesn't cut it. Sometimes you need to very specifically specify a single element out of every single other element. Fortunately, using HTML and CSS together, you can do that using a new selector called the ID selector. Okay? Pardon me, this right here, what do we call that? Hashtag. What else do we call that? Pound sign. It's technically called an octothorpe. But for today, I'm going to call it a hashtag. So, notice that we have exactly the same elements here as we do here. We've got a P, we've got a span, we've got a div. But they have an attribute applied to them. We have the attribute ID, and that's equal to never. We have the attribute ID, that's equal to going. The attribute ID equal to 2. Cool? On the CSS side of things, in order to select an ID, you use hashtag and then the name of the ID. So in this case, I have hashtag never, hashtag going, hashtag 2. I wonder if you can see where this is going. So, a couple of caveats. First, per the HTML spec, you're only allowed to use one ID per element. I cannot assign an element to have multiple IDs. That can be a very strong tool. It can also be a little bit inconvenient. Just keep that in mind when you're writing your HTML. Also, this is the power of IDs. I'm only allowed to use a specific ID once per HTML page. So if I was doing the entire Never Going to Give You Up by Rick Astley in an HTML page, I couldn't do it all with IDs because he says, never going to give you up, never, there's never again, going to let you down, not allowed, don't do it. But since I have just one never right here, totally fine. Okay? What questions do you have about ID selectors? Great, let's select something. I have no idea where an ID is. Right here. This ID equals Zen intro. Who wants to do something kind of interesting with the CSS property? I know that I'm kind of peppering properties and stuff in here. We're going to do something a little bit more interesting than just colors and sizes. We're going to do a background image, okay? So, let's first select this Zen intro. I do that by doing, here, I'm going to just put it here at the top. By the way, the order in which you put your CSS selectors does matter. Stuff towards the bottom is going to apply, it's going to override stuff above it. So as an example, I have this P tag, and it has the background color of red. If I add another P tag and I give it the background color of blue, it's going to override the background color red and change it to blue. But notice it doesn't override the color because it doesn't have a color property, only this one does. So the color is still Rebecca Purple. Okay, so far so good? So the order in which you put things in your CSS document matters. Back up here, hashtag Zen intro to select this section. I don't even know how big this section is, so just to see how big this section is, let's do background color really quick, and we'll make it red. And boom, it's just this upper section here. Awesome. Let's give that a super awesome background image. To do a background image, I have to use a special syntax to specify that I'm giving it a URL. Okay? Because in order to put an image in here, I have to grab it from somewhere on the internet. So I'm going to grab a super dope image, stick it in there. But first, I'll put my URL and then open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and my URL goes in the middle. Also notice that I put semicolons at the end. This isn't always necessary. CSS does work without semicolons, but it's a good practice because sometimes it doesn't work without semicolons and then your whole CSS selector breaks. Just a heads up. So let's find an image. Let's look for You can put whatever image you want, but oh yeah, that right there, that is my image. So once you find your image, you just right-click on it, choose Copy Image Address, and hang on a second, did anybody... He is, like, has aged very well. Look at that guy. Wow. Rick Astley, you are a rock star. I mean, literally. Okay, then you just paste the URL in there. Beautiful. My website are so awesome. I am so happy. It's a little bit big though. You can't see his lips because this text is in front of it. So let's add another CSS property, background size, and I just want it to be 50% the size that it was before. Bye, thanks for coming, watch the video later. So I'm just going to type in 50%, and then it's going to scale it down by 50%. Oh, just kidding. Haha, silly Alex. It's going to make it so that it fills its parent 50%. So this guy, you'll notice, fills half of it, and then it repeats, and this guy fills the other half. One more thing, just in case you were wondering, if you don't want it to repeat, that CSS, there is a CSS property for that. It's background repeat. And I can just set that to no repeat. You might be asking, how do you know all this? It's just because I've done it a million times, but I've also Googled it a million times. So if you're ever wondering, like, crap, how do I make it so that my background image doesn't repeat? You can just come here and say, Google, CSS background image no repeat. Boom. Sends me to this. W3 Schools is a pretty good resource. The developer.mozilla.org, this is the Mozilla web documentation, and it's pretty dang good too. It's about as good as it gets. And the nice thing is it gives me all of these examples, and I can say, oh, this is repeat X, this is repeat, it goes in all directions. And this, oh, put some space around it, that's cool. Oh, round, I have no idea what that even does. No repeat, oh, that's exactly what I want. And then space, repeat, oh, I can make it so that it has space on the sideways but not on the upways. So if you ever have questions, Google it. It's a great way to find your answers. Okay, that's the ID selector. What questions do you have? Super, let's get moving. ID selectors are great if you want to select a specific part of the page. But if you want to have something perhaps that is on multiple parts of the page, you can use what are called classes. A class, I'm just going to come down here to the bottom first. It's the best general use selector. If you want to just go ham on your CSS, use classes because they select only the things that you want them to select, and they aren't constrained by the rules that come with IDs. You can put multiple classes on a single tag. So you'll notice up here I have my P with the class attribute, and it's equal to give you up. And I have multiple CSS selectors or classes there, and I can have each of those be their own selector, which is awesome. And then you can use the same class multiple times on an HTML page. So you can see right here I have you down here and you up here. Totally cool. Go to town. Whatever the you selector here changes in the CSS is going to affect this element, and it's going to affect this element. What questions do you have about this? Okay, and one more thing that I need to point out. I have these selectors and I have commas between them. What that's called is group selectors. What this does is it allows me to say all of these selectors should have the same CSS. Notice this is different than the parent-child selector. Instead of being specific about these specific selectors with this parent-child relationship are going to have these styles, it says, no, 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 every single selector that I say here has the same style. This is really useful if you want to make it so that all of your selectors are, all the things you select are similar. For example, if I have all of my header all of my header element tags as selectors, I can change them all at the same time without having to have one for each of them, which is kind of convenient. So let's do that right now. I have my H2, well, I'm just going to do it for all of the H tags, and I'm going to make it so that they all have the same type of font, but I want that font to be different from everything else. Man, this website is ugly. Guys, I told you we are not talking about good design today, just how to make websites. So, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Awesome. And to change the type of font that I'm using, that's the font family property. And font family has, I can use any of the fonts for my computer, so I could use like Battlefield and, oh, Battlefield. Doesn't that font look like Battlefield? I'm going to change it to the color to black, just so you can see. Whoa. Actually, I'm going to change that to white. Yeah. Whoa, Battlefield. But it also has some built-in CSS keywords that you can use, like monospace, which make it a monospace font, or serif, which makes it so it has little serifs. Do you guys know what a serif is? Who doesn't know what a serif is? Raise your hand high in the air. Okay, this, right? You can see that, right? You see these little wingy dingies here? Those are serifs. Okay, it's a font term. Go to the HVAC, the design school, and ask them, and they will talk your head off about serifs and the benefits of serifs versus sans serifs fonts. So if I come here and say sans serif, check it out. No little wingy dingies. None whatsoever. So sans serif is also a keyword. My personal favorite, which is always a surprise, you never know what it's going to come up with, is fantasy. Mine uses the font Papyrus, which is literally the worst, second worst font that it could use. And the worst one is definitely this one. Ready? That's just... You thought I was going to say Comic Sans, right? Actually, Comic Sans is a very interesting font that was designed for a time when pixels were this big instead of being super tiny. There's a guy that actually writes about why Comic Sans is a really great font, and you should read it. His name's Dave Kadavi, and you can just Google Dave Kadavi Comic Sans. You're like, oh, why you hate Comic Sans? And this guy, look, there's even a talk about it. That's awesome. Yeah, here it is. And he explains all of the different things about fonts. It's really interesting. You might enjoy it. You might not. I don't know. Live your life. Okay, so now all of these are the same font, but it didn't change the font of anything else. Great. This website is starting to take shape. Speaking of shape, we should talk about laying stuff out. Because right now, everything is still in the rows and line breaks. We don't have any of the beautiful sidebars and stuff. So let's make it so that we have sidebars. But first, let's get through this, this shindig here. Yeah, okay, I'm going to go through some properties now. Look, here's some properties. Whoa, that's so many properties. Look, here's some more properties. All of these have to do with borders. You can put borders around stuff, and these are all the properties you can use for borders. That's not even all of them. There are more. It's kind of crazy just how many properties there are. Oh, look, there are even more properties. They go all the way off the page. I'm sorry, I'm bored of writing all of these properties out. If you want to know if you can do something in CSS, then Google, can I do this thing in CSS? And then you find out if you can do the thing in CSS or not. Chances are you probably can, yeah. I mean, you take a look at any website like Twitter, and oh, look at this awesome two-tone layout where this is centered perfectly in this section and this is centered perfectly in this section. And you've got these nice, like, look at that, where it pops up with that thing there, and you've got the thing over here and these things down here. All of that can be done with CSS. Cool. Yeah, back to this. But the way that properties work, you've seen this. We've been doing it this whole time. But you specify the property here, you specify the value here, and it's going to take all of those properties and apply them. So the funny thing about this, you might have noticed this is an actual HTML page, so I can inspect this right here, And you can see the styles that I applied right here. Boom, the color, the font size, the border, and the padding. And that's exactly what it is here, and that's what it looks like when you apply all of those styles to it. Cool? Also, this is kind of fun. Let me shrink this down a bit and shrink this down, and you can watch me. I can actually do this on any web page. You can edit the CSS in line of anything right here in any web browser, any modern web browser. So I can come here and I can be like, I want the font size to actually be 100 pixels, and I want the font family to be fantasy, because, oh, that's better, I guess. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, so you can even go to like, I don't know, Alex Anderson quilts. There's this lady, her name's Alex Anderson, and she makes quilts, but her website is not awesome because it doesn't have, you know what, I'm going to just be rude and style everything. Star styles literally everything on the web page, and I'm going to make everything have the background color of Rebecca Purple. And apparently I didn't get everything, so just to make sure that I get everything, I just add this important, and then everything is Rebecca Purple. And now, look, her website is amazing. Thanks, Alex Anderson. You're the best namesake person that we'll probably never meet. Yeah, so those two things that I just did, where I used the star, that's actually really bad because it selects everything, so make sure you know what you're doing. And where I did that bang important thing, you can do that, and it will override literally any CSS selector, even if another CSS selector is more specific. But it only works if the other selector doesn't have bang important on it. So use both of those very sparingly. Be very careful. Probably shouldn't have even showed you that, but I get carried away sometimes. Yeah. So I really am kind of annoyed because there's the super awesome box model thing that was, it's interactive. I could have played with it right here and you could have seen it and it would have been awesome. But it has broken HTTP certificates. So I just opened it in its own tab. It's not embedded, I'm sorry. Let me tell you about the box model. Literally everything in HTML and CSS is a box. And that's the #1 rule of CSS. Everything is a box. The #2 rule is don't use that star and that bang important thing because those are bad. But the #1 rule, everything is a box. That box is actually made up of several boxes. The innermost box is the content. This is the stuff that's actually inside of your HTML element. So if this was a P tag, this would be the text inside of the P. Okay? The next layer out is the padding. The padding pushes the content away, pushes away from the content to the next layer, which is the border. Okay? A border is an actual line that you can draw with the CSS that separates the content with the padding from the margin. And the margin pushes the element away from everything else. Who is following me? Oh, good. I'm glad. For those of you that aren't following me, don't worry about it. I'm going to demo it really quick and you'll see just how all of these things play together. But know that the box model is a really important thing to understand because when you're trying to position things, it's going to affect how all of that works. Okay? So let's actually make something nice. Okay? I know that I don't have any like buttons here, but I'm going to create a button and I'm going to put it right here. And it's going to be just like this. And since we have no other buttons, look at that thing. Isn't he cute? He's so little. Oh, and I need to put something in here. Button. That's why it's so little. Now it's going to be regular size. That's a nice button. Okay? Let's make this button actually look nice. I'm going to use several CSS properties. I don't expect you to memorize all of these properties, but just be aware that they exist. First thing first, we've got to select our button. That was easy. Next, let's make it so that our button has a little bit more padding. Okay? So first, let me show you what happens if I take away all the padding, because buttons actually have padding assigned to them by the web browser. The web browser knows, oh, if you're a button, you're going to have this much padding by default. But I can easily override that by going padding 0. And that's going to take away all the padding. Look at what happened. Our text got really squished against the sides. it doesn't have any padding. So let's give it some room to breathe. Let's start by giving it some padding all around. We'll start with 20 pixels. And woof, that's a lot. I think that our button would probably look better if it kept the same sideways horizontal padding, but we switched the vertical padding just a little bit. Okay? The nice thing is CSS has some nice shorthand for certain properties. We could do that by doing, okay, padding top 10 pixels, padding left 20 pixels, and that does it just fine, but that's kind of long and hard to write out. If we want to do it short, we just have to remember which the sideways is and which the top is and do one after the other. So I can never remember it, so bear with me for a second. Top goes first, so I want the top to be 10 pixels. Sideways goes next, so I want the sideways to be 20 pixels. That is a nice size button. Okay? Ooh, look at that. When you click on it, it barely changes at all. We'll change that. We'll make that better. Let's change our background color. Thus far, we've been using... am I going too fast for anybody? Awesome. Thus far, we've been using keyword colors, which is really interesting, actually, where all those color names came from. And again, why is there one called Rebecca Purple? It's because there was this cool web developer who had a daughter that died of cancer or something really tragic, and she was like 5 years old. This was her favorite color of purple, and so the people that invented CSS were like, we're going to put this color in for Rebecca. That was the little girl's name. So that's why Rebecca Purple's the thing. It's pretty cool. We're going to make this background color, though, a little bit more specific. We can use several things to define this color. The most common, though, that I've found is hex values. Who knows what a hex color value is? Raise your hand high in the air. Cool. For those of you that don't know, any color on a screen where the screen is generating the light and shooting it into your pupils, it uses 3 different colors to generate that: red, green, and blue. In RGB, it stands for red, green, and blue, you can define those colors as values from 0 to 255. So, and that's just the intensity of that individual color. And conveniently enough, you can represent 255 with two base 16 numbers. So base 16 goes from 0 to F. And using all of that together, you can generate pretty much any color that can be displayed by a screen using 6 letters. So I have this fancy little tool here. I can't zoom it in, I'm sorry. But I can choose any color that I want here. I can change the hue, and it gives me the hex value, which base 16 is called hexadecimal. That's why we call it hex. So if I wanted to give it this nice kind of blue color, I'll pick that one there, and it gives me this hex color. And then I can come here and set the background color to that color, but I have to put a hashtag in front of it. Hashtag signifies that it is a hex color. So far, so good? Cool. Let's give it a border color. I want my border to be slightly darker, so I'm just going to pick a nice darker hex color here. And then we'll say border color. Ooh. Oh, and I forgot the hashtag. And now my border color is that nice dark color. Awesome. Let's change the border size to be 3 pixels so that it's a little bit bigger and more apparent. That's not big enough. I want it to be 5 pixels. Oh, it's not border size, it's border width. Silly Alex. There we go. Oh, that's too much, so I'll make it 2 pixels. And now that's a good border there. And let's make it so that our border has a radius. And we'll make this 5 pixels. Fun fact, you can actually make circles. I know everything's a box, but if you wanted to, you could make it into a circle by changing this 5 pixels to being a really big percentage value, like 50%. That'll make it so that it completely circleizes everything. If I were to make it like 50 pixels, a ridiculously large number, it would just turn this into a pill button where it's just has a nice around the edges. But if you use percentage, it squishes it in all the way and makes it into an ellipse, which is pretty cool. Actually, I kind of like that, so I'm going to keep it like that. Okay, awesome. There's that. Let's see, what next? We can change our font weight. I want the font to be a little bit thicker, so we'll change the font weight to be like 600. Or I can change that to the keyword bold, and that also makes it bold. That's nice. And let's do one more thing. I want to make it so that when I hover over this button, it indicates that I'm actually hovering by changing the background color. Okay? So what I can do with this is add a special selector for hovering. That selector is hover. But I have to put it on the button. So I'm going to do button, then colon, hover, and then the open brackets. And then all I have to do is just override this background color. And because the button is underneath this button, it's going to override it. And I want that to be just a slightly darker color of blue. So now when I hover over this, it's going to change that background color. Let me show you one more thing really quick. I want to make it so that it's a nice transition. Okay? CSS gives us the ability to add transitions, which is changes between one thing and another, and animations, which is a continuous change of a property. And it's really easy, actually. Transitions are especially easy. I don't think I'm going to get into CSS animation today, but to add a transition, I just do transition, and then I give it a number of values. The first value being the property that I want to transition. In this case, it's background color. Then I give it the duration of the transition, how long I want it to take to transition. I'm going to say it's going to be 1 second. And then I can give it what's called an easing function. I'm not going to go into easing functions a whole lot. I'll let you figure that out yourself. But I'm just going to say ease. That is the name of an easing function. It's just ease. And it's really nice. And so when I hover over this, see that? It's subtle, but it's nice. If I make this a little bit faster, like if I make it 0.2 seconds, then you can see that nice little transition there. See, doesn't that make that nice? And I think these don't have transitions on them, but we saw another thing, where was it? On that, the CSS Zen Garden, it had transitions, so that was cool. Okay, any questions so far? Cool, let me make sure I'm still on track. I'm kind of going crazy. Box model, oh yeah. I want to make sure that this button has a lot of space around it. So now that I've given it some padding and a border, I'm going to use margin to push it away from everything else. Notice the padding still has the background color, but when I give it a margin of 20 pixels, say, it just pushes away and leaves white space. It doesn't use the background color at all. So that's one way that you can think of the difference between padding and margin. Padding pushes away from the border and keeps the background color. Margin pushes out from the border and just is white space. Okay, box model, yay. Super. How do you put styles into your HTML document? You've noticed here we've been writing all of our styles inside of this CSS area here. Fun fact, if I hit inspect and pull this up, you'll see that it's actually taking all of that CSS that we write and putting it inside of this style HTML tag. What? There it is. It's exactly the same stuff that we wrote. So that's one way you can do it, is with a style HTML tag. Everything that you put inside of that style, its content, becomes CSS. And it applies to the web page. So that's cool. And that's actually this middle thing right here. Another way that you can do it is with the style element, or yeah, the style attribute, where everything inside of that attribute is CSS, and you can apply it to that specific element. So this p tag is going to have the style color, red, border, solid, 1 pixel black. That is the style that it's going to get. So if we come here and I choose this road to enlightenment and I want to change its style, I'll come here and give it that element style, and watch right here as it puts the style equals in, and we'll say color is going to be bisque. Why not? So style equals color bisque, and now its color is Biask. And then the final way you can do it is the most typical way. This is where you have a separate CSS file, and it has only CSS inside of it. It doesn't have any HTML whatsoever, and you reference it in your HTML using a link tag. So we say link rel equals style sheet. That says this is a style sheet. Type equals text CSS. The style sheet is with CSS. Surprise though, there is no such thing as a style sheet that's not CSS yet, just FYI. And then finally you give it the href, which is the path to the file. Who can think of a good reason why you should use a separate CSS file? You have separation of concerns. You have your HTML in one place, you have your CSS in another. If you change the CSS here, it updates in the HTML page. Good answer. There's another reason, though, that I think is really important to consider. Yeah? Bingo. This way, instead of having to write the same CSS for every single HTML page, I write it in one file, I apply it to several web pages, and then all of them, several HTML files rather, and then all of them have the same style. This is really nice if you have multiple pages in your website and want to have the same style for all of those pages. Any questions? Cool. Yeah, we've been doing it this whole time. So I know that I said I would let you tell me some styles to do. So is there anything you want me to style here? I showed you how to do background images, how to change font and colors, and oh yeah, I told you that we were going to do some layout. So is there anything that you're just hankering for me to show you, or do you want to just do layout? Yeah? That's what I'm referring to with layout. So any objections to doing that? Cool. There are several ways of doing layout, and all of them have some sucky things about them. As time has gone on, in fact, within the past year and a half, new CSS properties have come out to make it a lot easier to do layout. Okay? Before, you had to do things with positioning, and I don't even want to get into the details. Then a thing called Flexbox came out, and Flexbox is amazing and lets you style things, and that's probably what I'm going to use to lay out this right now. And then another thing came out just a year and a half ago called Grid, which lets you lay out things in a grid, and that made things even more awesome. I'm going to let you study those on your own, and I'll give you some resources that you can use to study those on your own. For the time being, though, we're going to use Flexbox. Let me show you how this works. Yeah, let's see if this one works. Awesome. So the way that Flexbox works is in one dimension, okay? The way that HTML typically works is it takes your content and it lays it out left to right and then top to bottom, okay? And it goes like this. What Flexbox allows you to do is kind of turn that on its head and specify, it's like changing the gravity of where things go, okay? So suppose I were to have a Flexbox for my entire web page, and my web page had a header, and it had a sidebar, and it had some content, and then off the page it had a footer. And I can't draw there because this is in my way. Okay? Suppose, though, that I wanted to make it so that it was more like this, where I had my web page, and I had my sidebar, and I had my content, and I had my footer like this. Oh, and I forgot the header. I can do that with Flexbox. I can do it with CSS Grid too, but I'm going to do it with Flexbox, okay? What I do is I wrap the things that I want to change the dimensions of in what's called a Flexbox, and I specify the direction that that Flexbox is going to go. So for my web page, let me change the color really quick. It's going to be its own Flexbox, and I'm going to say that its direction is down. So far, so good. The elements are going to line up down. Then my header, which is, it's pretty much going to work because it's already the way I want it to be. Same thing with my footer. But these puppies, I'm going to put in another Flexbox, and I'm going to say that its direction is actually sideways. So instead of lining this one up here and then this one down here, it's going to line this one up here and then this one over here. Okay? So let's do that. Any questions so far? I hope that as we go through this, it'll make a little bit more sense. Here we are. So first, I have to get a feel for what our website looks like. So we've got our section there, and then we have our main here, and then we have a sidebar. So let's do it with our sidebar and our main. But I'm going to just wrap all of this in a div. And this is going to be class equals flex. And then underneath here, I'm going to say /div. Okay. So I just wrapped all of that in a flex, and I can now apply some CSS to that class. In fact, I didn't do any class selectors, but we can do that now. So .flex, it's going to select this flex class here. And to turn it into a flex box, I say display flex. Cool. You can see that that actually did change already. Something happened. Yeah, something happened. Great. Awesome. Problem solved. It is in a sidebar. We have our main section here. We have our sidebar over here. Doesn't look great, but we can improve that. Suppose that I wanted to have the sidebar over here instead of over here. I can change the flex direction. The default flex direction is actually row, which is the left to right, which is convenient. That's exactly what I wanted. If I want it to be opposite that, though, I can do row reverse, and then it's going to put this over here and have the main over here. So far, so good. Then if I wanted to make it so that it was in a column instead, I could do flex direction column, and then it's going to be in a column, which is the default. Well, not the default, but this looks like regular CSS anyway. And then if I think I want to keep it as a row, though. One thing that I want to do, though, is make sure that I have a little bit of space between these flex elements. So to do that, I'm actually going to apply a style to each of these to say how much they should flex. Okay. So let me add a .main class and a .sidebar class. And I'm going to say that the main class should take up 4 portions of the page. Okay? Already this is looking a little bit better, but let's specify that I want my sidebar to take up 1 portion of the page. And now, if you were to take a ruler and cut that up, you would see that this, in total, if it was 5 sections, the sidebar would take up 1 of them, and the rest would take up 4 of them. This, on the other hand, would be quarters. Pretty cool. Yeah, that's actually kind of boring, I can tell, but it works, I guess. It'd be more interesting if I had a footer. Do I have a footer? I don't really have a footer. That's kind of it. Yeah. I'm not going to worry about that right now. One thing that we can do, though, is center something in the middle of a web page. We saw that. We had that on Twitter. This was actually a ridiculously insanely hard thing to do before Flexbox, but now it's insanely easy. All I have to do, I'm going to delete all of my HTML because I'm the worst, and get rid of all my CSS too. I'm going to create a div. I'm going to put h1 in it that says hello. Because I'm punk, I'm going to say h1 font family sans serif, so it actually looks good. And then I'm going to style my div. I want my div to take up the whole web page. Actually, let me override one more thing really quick. HTML and body. Have no padding and no margin. Did you see the difference there? The HTML and the body automatically have padding in them. Sometimes you don't want to have that, though. I don't want it in this case. Now I want my div to take up the whole web page so that it fills the whole screen. So I'm going to set its width to 100 VH or VW. That is the viewport width. And then the height is going to be 100 VH. That's the viewport height. Notice, even if I come here and say text align, I know I'm just throwing CSS properties at you. I'm sorry. Go and learn these. It'll be awesome. That centers it just in the middle of where it's at, but it doesn't center it in the middle of the page. But I can do that with Flexbox. So if I say display flex to turn it into a Flexbox, nothing happens. But then I can use some special properties of Flex in order to say how I want it to be in its Flex container. So I can say justify content center. That puts it in the middle again. Great. So far so good. And then align items center. Boom. That is directly in the center. That used to be insanely hard to do, like I told you. Now it's insanely easy. I just have a couple of lines of CSS and boom, it's in the middle. I don't even need this text align center anymore. Hello. I suppose I should change that to goodbye because we're done. Any questions before we finish? Okay, I've got a couple more things for you. First, learn some more. I have this video tutorial here, this link, which you can follow. It actually starts, it's the same video series that I put in the HTML presentation, but it starts on the CSS, where CSS starts going. So you can learn from that guy, and he goes a little bit slower than I do. There's this Interneting is Hard. It has all of the stuff that you need in order to build these fancy CSS layouts, and it talks a little bit more about design. The Web Dev Guild is something that I built. It's a collection of all kinds of stuff that you can do with resources. It talks about basic CSS. You can dive deep into CSS selectors, CSS attributes. I call them attributes here. Technically, they're called properties. In fact, I say it here, but here I say attributes. I'm weird. And then if you want to dive more into CSS layout, there's actually this really great Learn CSS Layout website, which is literally just learning all the different ways to do CSS layout. So that's great. And then finally, you can dig into Flexbox, and there's this adorable thing you can do called Flexbox Froggy, which is where you use Flexbox in order to move the frog to where it's supposed to go. So I can say, oh, I want to justify content flex end, and then the froggy goes over there, and then I can go on because life is good. So you can learn Flexbox that way, and it's awesome. And that's all in the Web Dev Guild, so check that out. And then I have this hardcore projects, which is just like, here are 5 projects that you can do that are really awesome, that'll be challenging, that can help you level up your front-end web development game. I found this is actually a brand spanking new website called Front End Mentor, which is pretty awesome, that I just found. It gives you these challenges that you can do that are pretty standard, pretty basic, like make a landing page with a single column layout, or make a landing page with split benefits layout, or whatever. And you view the challenge, it gives you everything that you need right here. So let me download this really quick. Oops. I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, don't open. Oh, that's a study guide. Yeah, go away. So yeah, it gives you... Oh, it's full screen. That's why it's not showing up. There we go. Gives you the README that explains everything you need to know. Gives you a style guide to tell you all the different things that you should do. It gives you images, mock-up, and some images that you can use for this design. Oh, look at that nice illustration. Those people, they look so productive. And a logo. And then it gives you the full design that you're supposed to be replicating. And then finally, it gives you just a base HTML page that has all of the content, and you just do the CSS. I guess. I don't know. I haven't done any of these because it started, like I said, last week, so I haven't had the time to try one out, but could be fun. Yeah. That's all. Again, this presentation, I'm going to throw it up on the Slack channel, and you can grab all the links from there. Thanks, guys.